So we're talking about Skinamarink today, probably one of the most talked about horror films, a very low-fi, low-budget horror film, but it seems to be getting a lot of traction, particularly on social media. Lots of people have seen it already in the US. I'm joined once again by Paul and by Matt. My name is Phil. We are Boys on Film. How are you guys?
Good.
Yeah, good, thanks.
So Skinamarink, were you looking forward to seeing this? I presume you both were.
Yeah. I think you sent me the trailer, Phil, and it looks like the trailer's short enough where you get intrigued, like, oh, this is going to be kind of like an action horror film, but this is the really scary build-up scenes. And no, the trailer is the whole film, basically.
Pretty much, yeah. The film is extended. The extended version. Yeah. An hour and 40 minutes.
Yeah.
Written and directed by Kyle Edward Ball. It's his feature directorial debut.
I mean, it's one of those films where it certainly doesn't give you the answers of what's going on, and it's more like you, as the viewer, or the camera is placed in this place, and you're kind of vaguely aware of some stuff that's going on. But it's a house, kind of lights are off, flickering lights, things seem a bit strange, and then you realise that there's a family that live there, but the parents seem absent, and then you kind of see there's two very small children there. It seems that something's happened, and then something's going very strange in the house, and things are moving, and perspectives are changing. Is there something in the house that's done this? Is something they're scared of? Kind of like, and this is what the director's intended to be. It's kind of like a sort of waking, like a nightmare when you wake up as a little kid and you're a bit disoriented and you don't really know what's going on. And they kind of sustain that quite well, because as an audience you don't really know what's going on.
It's definitely a mood piece, isn't it? It feels like, I mean, It's obviously experimental, so it's not going to be for everybody. It doesn't necessarily explain itself. You're left wondering what the hell is going on, I think, throughout.
There's a lot of potentials in the film, I think. Like, it's potentially a horror movie. It's potentially a sci-fi movie. It's potentially a haunted house, potentially demonic possession, potentially
a shit art house film.
Yeah.
No, but it's not. It's not. But
it's a lot of build-up of it's going to be this, and then it never really says what it is by the end of it. It's kind of all left up to your imagination about what you think is really going on here, which is both good and bad. It's good in the fact that it's not an easy, like, Blumhouse horror movie where everything's spelled out for you and you get it. But at the same token, it's at the far end of that where it's so abstract that it could mean anything you want it to or nothing. I was kind of hoping for some kind of like plot device that told me something.
And I think the risk, therefore, is that if you don't have that bit of a plot or narrative or something to hook what's going on to, you might get bored. I think if you are going to watch it, there's probably a certain way you need to watch it, and there's certain expectations you need to have of what you're going to get. And if you're wanting a horror that hits those beats and has what you have in horror film, it's not going to be there. If you're wanting something that's going to give you quite an unsettling experience and make you feel weird, then you will get that. But you probably need to commit to it and like have lights off, focus, don't look at your phone. It's interesting that even so much of it is like static shots where it's just a camera at a weird angle, like the camera's just like being dropped next to the sofa.
Oh,
and
the
you're
Lego.
sort of struggling to see what's going on. Yeah, lots of Lego. Was it you call them Legos in America, don't you? I love that.
Yeah,
Legos. Lots of Legos. So you'll have like lots of like, but then it's almost like these shots are so long that then actually something will change or something will suddenly move, and so it's really when that happens, it's really unsettling. There's a very, very, very disturbing end, as in like, oh, what's going on here? But it doesn't give you the answers. And then there's also another bit with one of the children where something happens quite quickly, and it has echoes of that kind of final scene of Blair Witch Project where the guy's in the corner, where there's just some strange behaviour going on and you don't really know why. Be prepared to let yourself go, dive deep, be enveloped in it, and then you're going to have quite an odd experience. And probably you're going to have an experience that gets quite close to replicating some of the disorientating stuff and the terror. And to be fair, I did get to the point where I was sort of looking a bit like this, I was thinking, is something going to happen?
I've got mixed feelings.
Yeah.
I kind of like the weird camera angles where you're just looking at a fraction of the ceiling, like the corner of the room. Or you're looking down. There never seems to be any eye-level shots, which does seem quite disorientating. You're not looking at somebody's face. You never see the children. No. You just see legs. You just see feet. You just see, you see like people moving around. And a lot of the time you see, well, you think you see something that you don't see because the image is so grainy or blurry. There's lots of scratches on the screen, obviously, because it's lo-fi, and it feels very unsettling, and I like that. I think it's really clever to make a film that looks like that and feels like that, because the sound design I think is really good, because there are some really scary jolts. There's a lot of jump scares which involve the sound, because the sound comes in really loud.
Yeah.
There's like a bang or a toy making a loud noise or something, or like a window going, and I think that does seem really effective. But equally, that can be really frustrating. I think if you're wanting something to happen, not a lot really does happen, but then occasionally you get glimpses or you get flashes of that.
I mean, it reminds me, I remember years ago when I saw the first ever Paranormal Activity at the cinema, and I remember at that time thinking, it's kind of like, it's a gimmick, and obviously that spawned a huge amount of sequels, almost a whole genre, amazing. But I do remember at the time saying to my friend that I saw it with, like, part of why I struggled with it is there's a certain standard that's there in filmmaking that we take for granted, which is music, editing, various of those other things that in a normal feature film you only notice them when they're not there. And I remember with Paranormal Activity being like, watching CCTV style footage for 80 minutes or whatever that is quite exhausting, because normally we're used to the technical elements of the film giving us more, kind of taking us on the journey. And obviously that's talking about Paranormal Activity, where there is actually a plot and a kind of structure, and even though it's all again building up to jump scares, whereas this is like that, but without any sense of what's going on, and also not that thing where it's a fixed camera and you're seeing everything going on. Sometimes the camera's there, sometimes it's there. There's one scene where it seems like the camera's from perspective of someone who must be walking on the ceiling. In this place, things are shifting and like door frames are changing. So there's some really like terrifying shots where you see something and then you're like, that can't be. That's like, if I'm looking at this, it looks like it's a floor with a load of toys on it, but actually it's not. It's the wall, and all those toys are just suspended against the wall. So it's disturbing, but perhaps more in a way about the sort of thing, sometimes when you go to like a art exhibition and there's like a room with an installation on some arty thing and it's on a 15-minute loop and it's crackling away. It's that kind of thing.
I was going to mention that because it kind of reminded me a little bit of Punch Drunk, the theatre company that do very expressive kind of, you don't know what you're seeing and it's not the same thing every time you go and see it. It always changes. It's like kind of improvised, but not, because they know what they're doing. But it is that kind of mood piece. I mean, it's something definitely that I think you would see at some kind of experimental dance company's production or something like that. I don't know whether it's something that everybody will want to see on film necessarily. I mean, Matt, did you see this at home or did you see it in the cinema? Because I would imagine it's a completely different experience in a theatre.
Yeah, I saw it at home, and it might have been, I don't know if it's better or worse to see it at home, because you can pause it and leave for a second. Because if you're in a theater, you're stuck there, and I'm sure there's a bunch of people moving in their seats and being like, ugh, and like sighing and stuff. Because there's long stretches where nothing happens and you're just kind of like, you can just feel the tension of people being upset that nothing's going on. Is it good because of that, or is it bad because of that? Like, because if you're seeing it as a good point of view, it's doing a really good job of making you really on the edge and fearful of something. Sometimes if you're watching the TV and like there'll be a shot, like we said, of like the sofa for 5 minutes, and you kind of eventually just look away or look at your phone or look at something in the room. And if you look back, you might miss something that happened. That happened at least once during the movie. There's one time where there was text on screen just for like maybe 10 seconds. And if you miss that text, you might not know what's going on. There's text about a date It says day number.
Was it like
day
527 days or something? I couldn't work out whether that was
really
the days that had passed.
Story. Yeah, I think that's really important to the story. And if you don't see that, you don't really understand what's going on. My husband, who watched it with me, he was looking it up, like, what's this? What's the backstory of this film? Like, what's it supposed to be about? And it was all theoretical. It's not like the filmmaker says it's about X. It was like people online saying it's about this, it's about that. And one of the theories is that one of the kids, I think the son, because the son makes a phone call to 911, right? And it says he's been hit or something, or he fell down the stairs or something like that. Is that right?
He says he's got a knife in his eye or something.
It was something where he was injured somehow.
Yeah.
And the theory is that the father, I'm assuming it's the father, hit him or pushed. I swear it was something about the stairs, like he fell on the stairs or something. The father injured him somehow.
Because the father goes missing, right? So maybe that's why, because he's run off because he's realised what he's done wrong. And
that the kid was so injured that he is actually in a coma. How about this? It could be that this is all in someone's mind who lives in the house, but not as it is happening currently, but in his mind, like, this is this kind of surreal version of what happens in my house because I'm not there anymore. I'm either dead or I'm in a coma or I'm years past from when this happened, and it's just kind of like a dream of what happened in this house. So possibly, I don't know.
The director, I think, made a few short films, and in doing it, he asked people to send him elements of childhood nightmares that they remember, that things were often in like their and then he basically then devised these short films around the things that were consistent, such as a faceless figure, a flickering TV. And so from reading that, I think it's actually been, I think it has been assembled more of an experience, and I don't even know whether there's that much of a commitment to a narrative by the filmmakers. In all the stuff that you're saying is really plausible about what it can be, but I think they've actually gone more for the experience, and it could just be lots of little bits of a kid waking up from different nightmares and whatever, but yeah, we just don't know. But
yeah, because they've used a lot of footage, like cartoons and stuff, because I noticed the credits at the beginning said that they were films that were out there in the public domain, like have been. So I'm guessing they're like from the 20s or something, because they're old school cartoons, and that is in itself is quite creepy, isn't it? Because it's almost like what they did in was it Jeepers Creepers with the old Peep Show type thing.
They obviously do that because using those things there's a whole wealth of old stuff where there's no copyright or whatever, so you can use them and that's fine. So that's why they would have done it. But yeah, it definitely adds a huge amount more tension than if it were Muppet Babies or Tom and Jerry or The Simpsons or whatever.
It tears up the rule book, and I think for that, it's quite admirable. But
yeah,
it's not necessarily something I would want to see again. I wouldn't want to sit through an hour and 40 minutes of that again. But, it's kind of memorable as well. And I think it's one of those films that you do remember where you saw it, and you do remember elements of it.
I also think it's one of those films that, it doesn't give you a lot of answers, but I don't get the sense that if I watched it again, I would. Whereas, something like, a David Lynch film, Mulholland Drive, or even something more obscure like Inland Empire.
This was like a lot of David Lynch shorts.
Yeah. You're never going to nail it with those films, but at least you might get a bit more. Whereas I think with this, I feel like I've seen it. And again, with those other films, there are other narrative aspects and performances and whatever that then that keep you hooked in. But I definitely think that David Lynch very much David Lynch, like a sort of flickering lamp in some 50s build. There's that kind of like
in a Razorhead.
Yeah.
It also has a strong poltergeist element to me, with a TV set always on that gives a blue light to everything.
And I think that must have been intentional, because you're expecting, it's like, why is the kid not sat in front of that?
Like I said before, the timelessness where it's like the 80s TV set poltergeist, but the 1930s strange cartoons that children, I don't think children would be watching that in contemporary times. And it's just kind of like, and the kind of decor looks Like it could be 70s sometimes. And
I didn't understand why it was set in the 90s because it didn't have that vibe. Like you say, it was very 70s or 80s to me. I don't get the relevance of that at all.
Maybe just because there's no cell phones. Maybe
Oh, maybe
that might be it. I don't
just
know.
felt older.
It could be more related to the filmmakers and people involved in it, and if they're trying to replicate their childhood, that's when their childhood was. Obviously,
sounds likely.
But old gits like us, we're talking like the 50s. No, not really. I'm a child of the 80s. What you never want to do is feel shortchanged by something or never feel ripped off. And I think, from what you said at the start, Matt, it's kind of like you can watch the trailer, and the trailer makes it seem more dynamic than it is, because those are the 7 dynamic moments in the whole film put together. If people are interested and have got the patience, I think you can get something really good out of it. And I think it does hit certain buttons of kind of creepiness and dread, and maybe it comes down to more of a sort of raw, what do you watch horror for? If you're wanting it to sort of sit on the sofa with popcorn with your hand around your partner and jump and giggle and laugh and all that, you're not going to get, it's not that horror experience. But
do think it had an effective end, but when it did end, it was one of those films that ended, and when you give that expression of it's like, not quite is that it, but it was a bit is that it, because I'm like, there was no resolution really. It is a mood piece, isn't it?
I definitely went from watching it kind of like with TV, looking at my phone a bit, kind of like, I know we shouldn't when we're watching films, but when you're reviewing,
well, Sean cooks his dinner, so I wouldn't worry about it.
But then I definitely went to like, you know what, I'm losing some of this by not paying attention, and so I then did get really engrossed, but it was still quite a long time, and I was mindful of the clock, and I think it but it's also not something you could really fast forward through or watch in another way. I think you've just got to either just go for it. And
were you scared, either of you? Matt, were you scared?
I was never scared on the edge of my seat, but I watched it at night in the dark, so in a pretty quiet room. So once you're like really deep into the movie, like an hour into it, there is some like unsettling, just like feeling of not being scared, but just being a little bit unsettled. Do you know what I mean?
There also is, I think, probably almost one singular moment of a character doing something quite close, like appearing in front of the camera, that I don't want to say it is. I'll spoil the one exciting moment in the film, but that's quite memorable. It's really hard because you don't, there's in a way it's a real achievement, but it's achieved something in what it's done, and it's been really bold and brave in doing that.
And also, it's divided people, because a lot of people are giving this like really low score or a really high score. It's like one Marmite movie. It's like one way or the other.
It had an accident in its journey that's kind of contributed to its sort of mythology, and it was in a film festival somewhere, and it was sent there. And obviously, when you have a film festival, you often upload the screeners digitally, and the film festival messed something up, and the film got available for people to sort of pirate, so it got leaked and loads of people watched it. Almost a sense of, was it actually found footage type stuff?
Too hyped,
which I don't
as well.
think was intentional, but it's like coming across this stuff going, what is this? And kind of,
because when you got a lot of people on social media saying it's the best, the scariest film ever, you're kind of like quite cynical about that. Well, I am anyway, because I always think it's not going to be. It's like they did it with Hereditary, and yes, Hereditary was good, but it wasn't the scariest film since The Exorcist. Come on, let's be real. I mean, it was great. I did love it, but it wasn't the scariest film since The Exorcist.
It was disturbing, and it had some very scary moments. But anyway, we're not talking about Hereditary.
No, we're not.
You know that it's based. There's a song that's called something like Skinamarink.
I heard that. Yeah, is it a song from the 20s?
I saw that in the. Wasn't it in the credits or something, or maybe it was in the description?
It's like Skinamarink or something, and apparently it's like an old song that kids would sing. But apparently
I don't think that's true.
Apparently the director changed the letter because he said he didn't want children who know the song looking for it online and then coming across this film and then being really freaked out. Very considerate.
Yeah, whatever. Don't fall for that.
really elaborate way to explain a typo, isn't it?
Yeah, terrify the kids. I'm all up for that.
Yeah.
I was terrified as a kid. Didn't hurt me.
Was it in Halloween 3? Give them masks that Blow their heads.
Right, no. If it was percentages, I know it's not, it would be 50%. What's that in stars? Like 2.5?
2.5,
Between
yeah.
2.5 and 3? So would it be 2.5 and 3? Because like I was divided in the middle of really liking it and really not liking it.
Yeah.
In equal amounts.
Yeah. So you're going to break the rules. You're going to go for 2.5 stars.
Are there no halves?
It's got to be 2 or 3. I know that's really awkward.
Yeah, because 2 sounds bad, but 3 sounds a little bit too nice for the experience.
To be fair, I'm going to say 3, but a good 3. I think 3 just sometimes just means like. I mean, the whole thing is you can't. It's not meh. It's not, but it's just not necessarily.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily the viewing experience you want, but it's still, I think, a good piece of filmmaking. So I think I'll happily give it 3, and I wish I could give it a bit more.
Because it's not like it's the freshest thing in terms of lo-fi experimental horror movies. I mean, we've seen a lot of that before, but I think it was effective for the kind of style of film it was. I think it did have an impact, but it's not, like I say, it's not. I wouldn't want to see it again.
It also commits to what it's doing and doesn't kind of like, you could almost lose. You could say that it could lose its nerve and then explain a bit more or do something else. You know what though? It's interesting when I said art house film. It's like, and I won't get started on art house films. I'm the one who doesn't. I don't do art house films for boys on film. But I think, you know what? It's one of these films. If you were to say, oh, it's from Russia and it's directed by this whatever, and some people would say it's amazing. I mean, what was that film where it was just someone holding a camera outside a train for 2 hours, and it, like, I do think that this is probably unfairly judged because of its genre, when actually, if it was from somewhere in Eastern Europe and made by some celebrated, fated director, people would be like, oh, it's a slow burning, meditative exploration of whatever, whereas we're just a bit like, oh, it's just not that scary or not whatever. So yeah, I think he should divide it into 3 pieces, do it as an installation at the Tate Modern or something, with bits of the actual room, bits of Lego on the floor. Then that's where it's meant to be, and it'll.
Do you know what though? That fucking Lego did my head in. I wanted another shot that wasn't a close-up of fucking Lego.
Also, the terror of stepping on Lego in the dark, that was horrifying. We all know about that. There was also quite a scary toy phone, wasn't there?
Oh yeah,
that was in Poltergeist 2.
Ah,
there was a phone mystery ringing.
Yeah,
and she picked it up and she says they're back. Do you remember that?
Right. Yeah. So it's not the freshest idea then, really, is it?
2 stars. I think this director, with a bigger budget and with a plot line in a film, might do something really great for his next film. Because I think you can see there's potential there with his ideas and the way he sets things up. But imagine it with with 10 times the budget and an actual plot. It might be a lot more successful, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I'm always admiring of the films that resist the big reveal, because quite often so many horror films are based on premise, and then when they're let down is when they reveal what the monster is or the baddie is, and particularly if it's bad CGI or bad makeup and whatever, that can let it down. So I do think it's admirable when films sustain that, but I do think with this one you just needed a little bit more. Like I can deal with like not knowing or ambiguity, but it did feel like a lot of screen time was kind of nothing.
Yeah,
which
1 hour
is contributing to it. But
1 hour 40 minutes is a long time for this kind of film.
Yeah, and I was really surprised that I think this film, sometimes you see horror films that are like, they don't even make the 90-minute mark. Sometimes you see ones that are like 67 minutes something. I think this, I was actually surprised when I stopped it to look at what the remaining time was. I was like, an hour, that's a long time for this. I think you could probably have lost, through editing it in whatever ways, you can probably have lost a good 20 minutes from it and not lose any of that atmosphere, any of that tension.
Yeah, it would have been a better film, I feel like.
Yeah. So there we go, Skinamarink. It's available on Shudder. Let us know if you've seen it. Let us know if you're going to see it. Comment below. Thanks, guys. Always good to see you.
Thank you.
You too. Thank you.
Thank you for watching. We'll see you on the next one. Bye for now.
Bye.